Hopkins Hospital with the psilocybin experimenters, because one of the most recent things they showed was that if you take people dying of cancer and you give them psilocybin and they have a mystical experience, which is something like an experience of the kingdom of God on earth, but also eternally at the same time, that they lose their fear of death, or that at least it's much modified. And, you know, that's a hell of a finding. That's really, you can't just walk away from that easily, because that's a hell of a thing to treat.
Well, yeah, I have a chapter on that in Heavens on Earth on near-death experiences. But we're talking about two different things. You know, the transitioning from life to death in the most pain-free or anxiety-reduced state is progress. You know, medical progress, psychological progress, or whatever. And I'm all for, you know, if psilocybin does it or whatever, then great, we should do that. But there's a lot of people that claim more than that this is opening the doors of perception into another world.
Right.
It's actually out there, and that those of us who have not taken acid, we just simply can't know. So now we get at this question of truth. You know, it's one of my columns in Scientific American, I recently wrote, called "What is Truth Anyway?" I mean, when I say, like, I prefer dark chocolate and you prefer milk chocolate, you know, there's no truth that is to be discovered. Yours is true for you, mine's true for me. Or I say Stairway to Heaven is the greatest rock song of all time, and you say, no, Freebird is better than Stairway to Heaven, and we argue about that. But there's no experiment we're going to run. And so as we start to move along these lines, like when Deepak Chopra tells me meditation works, okay, so if it works for you or it doesn't work for me, okay, those are still in that state of internal truths. But what we want to know in science is, does it work for everybody? Or, you know, 67% of people that do an hour of meditation a day under these conditions have reduced stress hormones and blood pressure and so on in some measurable way. That's different than just an internal state. So when we're talking about, again, just, you know, working on toward striving to better ourselves or some kind of heaven, if you mean just, you know, metaphorically so that I can better myself, that's different than there's an actual place you can go to that's going to be there after we die. And so I think this is where, you know, scientists go, wait a minute.
You also start messing about with the idea of place in a way that's the problem with having discussions about fundamental realities. And, you know, when you said, another thing that Christ said was that the kingdom of heaven is spread upon earth, but men do not see it. Right. So, and that's something that's akin to the idea of the kingdom of God is within you. Although it's a strange twist on it, because it also adds an element of externality or physicality to it, and an element of immediacy, not something that's forestalled into the future. But I wonder, see, in my wilder moments of speculation, I have this notion that if things stack up properly, so imagine that you're immersed in a very deeply meaningful experience, and it's operating, it's indicating that harmony has been established between multiple levels of being simultaneously. I wonder if that can put you in a place that's profound enough or deep enough so that the structure of time and space itself starts to warp around that. I mean, I know that's I can't formulate it well, but there's something about it that seems to me to be correct about that, because people have intimations of immortality, and they have intimations of heavenly and hellish abodes as well, and they're not the simple kind of rational, even rational fundamentalist beliefs that often people talk about when they're discussing religious belief. They're more reflected in direct experience, and it's not easy to make sense of them.
That is a huge problem, even within the language that we use. You know, when you say, don't be such a girl, don't be such a pussy, the greatest insults that men can give each other tend to have feminine origins, like, you know, as I said, pussy or faggot, or anything like that. And I think, again, that speaks to a very systematic inequality between the genders.
And you attributed the rates of mental illness among men to their inability to express, say, sentimental emotions. And I don't think there's a shred of clinical evidence to support that stance.
Deborah Yergelin Todd and her associates at Harvard have used sophisticated MRI imaging to examine how emotion is processed in the brains of children from the ages of 7 through 17. In young children, these researchers found that negative emotional activity in response to unpleasant or disturbing visual images seems to be localized in phylogenetically primitive areas deep in the brain, specifically in the amygdala. A phylogenetically primitive area of the brain is one that hasn't changed much in the course of evolution. It looks pretty much the same in humans as it does in mice. That may be one reason why it doesn't make much sense to ask a 7-year-old to tell you why she is feeling sad or distressed. The part of the brain that does the talking, up in the cerebral cortex, has few direct connections to the part of the brain where the emotion is occurring, down in the amygdala. In adolescence, a larger fraction of the brain activity associated with negative emotion moves up to the cerebral cortex. That's the same division of the brain associated with our higher cognitive functions: reflection, reasoning, language, and the like. So the 17-year-old is able to explain why she is feeling sad in great detail, and without much difficulty, if she wants to. But that change occurs only in girls. In boys, the locus of brain activity associated with negative emotion remains stuck in the amygdala. In boys, there is no change associated with maturation. Asking a 17-year-old boy to talk about why he's feeling glum may be about as productive as asking a 6-year-old boy the same question. A recent study from a team of German researchers duplicated this finding in young adults. In young women, brain activity associated with negative emotion was mostly up in the cerebral cortex, whereas in young men, it remained stuck down in the amygdala. Emotions, both positive and negative, are processed differently in girls' brains than in boys. Let's pause to think about the implications of this difference. In boys, as in men, the part of the brain where emotions happen is not well connected to the part of the brain where verbal processing and speech happens, unlike the situation in teenage girls and in women. There's been much talk in recent years about the need to increase the emotional literacy of boys. Such people maintain that boys would be better off if we encouraged them to talk more about their feelings. That sort of talk betrays, in my judgment, a lack of awareness of basic sex differences and the underlying wiring of the brain. Asking a teenage boy to talk about how he feels is a question guaranteed to make most boys uncomfortable. You're asking him to make connections between two parts of his brain that don't normally communicate. This is a very different task for a boy than for a girl. As one 13-year-old boy said, "My English teacher wants me to write about my feelings. I don't know what my feelings are, and I can't write about them. Anyway, my feelings are none of their business.